You won't believe it, but when I won first prize in the statewide math competition, my parents said just 2 words, "Good job." But when my younger brother, Noah, got an honorable mention in a local soccer tournament, they threw a BBQ party and invited nearly the whole neighborhood. That was when I realized fairness was a luxury in my family. Every effort I made was invisible in their eyes, while Noah only had to breathe correctly to be praised like a genius. At one point I even wondered if I had been switched at birth, because I clearly didn't belong here. My name is Sophie. I'm 26 years old, born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm the eldest in a family of 4, my parents, me, and my younger brother Noah, who's 3 years younger. On the surface, we looked like any typical family. A 2-story wooden house with white fences and a small backyard garden full of lavender my mom planted, but behind that door was a world where I learned to survive in silence, because no matter how hard I tried, I was just a faint shadow next to the spotlight they always reserved for Noah. I started noticing the difference when I was very young, maybe around 2nd grade. That day, I had been chosen to recite a poem for our school celebration. I practiced all week, rewriting every line, and when I got home, excited to tell my mom, she just mumbled, "Oh, that's fine. But don't forget to bring in Noah's shoes from the porch, it's going to rain." I stood frozen, still holding the paper that my teachers had praised as emotional and beyond her age. But all my mom cared about were Noah's dirty shoes. Noah was always different. Always special. The year he got into the school's soccer team, just the junior varsity, not even varsity, my parents went around telling everyone like he had been drafted to the national team. They bought him a brand new pair of Adidas cleats, worth nearly $200, while I was still using a hand-me-down backpack from last year with frayed straps. I never had a proper birthday party. The last time I had a cake was when I turned 10, a small discounted one from the grocery store. But when Noah turned 13, my parents booked a full outdoor party at Centennial Park, with tents, balloons, tons of food, and over 30 guests. I remember standing in the corner, taking pictures for him on my phone, and overhearing my mom tell a friend, "He deserves it all, he always brings joy to this family." Joy. Did anyone ever ask how I felt? Did anyone ever ask if I was okay doing homework alone, with no one to help, while Noah got mom sitting beside him going through every math problem, every paragraph, and rewarding him with vanilla ice cream afterward? I studied by myself, took care of myself, fought to get on the honor roll, only to receive a few indifferent nods. In high school, I got a perfect score in science and was nominated to join the prestigious STEM program at the University of Minnesota. I was thrilled and printed the invitation letter to show my parents, thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd be proud this time. But Dad only looked up from the TV for 3 seconds and said, "Well, do whatever you want. Just don't slack off on your chores." And Mom gave a tight smile. "Studying is good, but remember, you're a girl. Don't get too caught up. You'll need to take care of your family once you're married." I lost count of how many words I swallowed back. Every time Noah got driven to school, while I had to bike through the snow, I told myself, "It's fine." Every time I had stomach cramps and Mom said, "Don't exaggerate," while Noah sneezed and got hot lemon tea with a warm towel, I tried to convince myself, maybe she just forgot. But the truth is, she didn't forget. She just didn't care. All throughout my childhood, I felt like I was stuck in a math problem where no matter how hard I tried, I was always the wrong number. I tried to be the model child, obedient, studious, but none of it ever mattered unless I was Noah. And little by little, I realized, it wasn't that I lacked achievements. I lacked being their choice. They chose to cherish one of us, and I wasn't the one. I still remember that afternoon so clearly. A gloomy May afternoon, gray skies overhead, but my heart was bright with hope. I had just graduated, summa cum laude in economics from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. 4 years of school, 3 part-time jobs, 2 breakdowns when I almost lost my scholarship, and one single phone call from my mom the entire time, all of it led to that moment. I had imagined different scenarios. At the very least, a hug, a "Sophie, we're proud of you." I didn't need fireworks or gifts, just acknowledgement. But my parents showed up nearly an hour late, not because of traffic, but because they had stopped to buy a discounted bouquet of tulips at the supermarket near campus. The flowers were wilted. And that was all they brought for my graduation. "I thought yellow looked nice on you. Look, it even has a bow." My mom beamed, holding the bouquet like it was a treasure. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I looked down at my worn-out shoes, the dress I had borrowed from my roommate, and whispered, "Thanks, Mom." After the ceremony, I asked softly, "Should we go eat something to celebrate? I know a nice Italian place nearby." Dad looked up from his phone and asked, "Who's paying?" I stayed quiet. They didn't ask what I wanted. They didn't discuss it. They just got in the car and let me drive them to the restaurant, where I paid a $120 bill, with the money I'd saved up for months working at the campus library. No thank you. No congratulations. Just a comment about how I should learn to eat more frugally. I gave a strained smile as I cut into my lasagna, my stomach twisting with bitterness I swallowed, along with every spoonful of soup. That day, I made myself a promise. I would never expect anything from them again. But that promise fell apart 2 years later. When Noah graduated, I was working as a financial analyst at a private firm in St. Paul. It was a Thursday morning and I had just finished making coffee when I got a text from my mom. "Noah's graduation party tonight, 6 p.m. at Stone Creek Restaurant. Don't be late, bring a gift." No invitation, no phone call. No one asked if I was free, just a command. I stared at the message, my mind freezing. I remembered that lonely dinner 2 years ago. I remembered every indifferent glance, the cold clinking of silverware on plates, and how no one ever said the words, "We're proud." And now, once again, I was being summoned like some background extra at the Golden Boys celebration. I didn't reply to the text, but that evening, I still showed up, because part of me was still a sister. I had ordered an iPad Pro, priced over $1,300, and asked the store to gift wrap it and deliver it straight to the restaurant. When I walked into Stone Creek, a place I had never set foot in despite working just a few blocks away, I was stunned. Crystal chandeliers, long tables draped in crisp white linen, over 60 guests laughing and chatting, and a 3-tier cake covered in navy blue frosting. Noah's favorite color. I stood there like an uninvited guest, while Noah's friends and extended family I didn't even recognize were warmly welcomed. I asked a server, "Is there any seat available?" He checked the list, then shook his head. "Sorry, everything has been reserved." I looked around. There were still chairs. One next to Noah even, still empty. I walked toward it, but my mom stepped in front of me. "That seat's for Jason, Noah's best friend, he's just running a little late." I gave a tight smile. So his late-arriving best friend gets a seat, but My mom shrugged and cut me off. "Did you at least bring a gift? If not, it's better you don't embarrass the family." I swallowed the lump in my throat. Just then my phone buzzed. It was the delivery driver. "I'm outside the restaurant with the iPad order for Noah, should I bring it in?" I took a deep breath and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Yes, bring it in." The room went quiet. All eyes turned toward the delivery man walking in, holding a neatly wrapped gift box. I smiled and stepped forward. "Noah, this is your graduation gift. An iPad Pro." Gasps echoed through the room. Noah's jaw dropped, his eyes lit up. My mom whispered to a distant cousin, "See, I knew she wouldn't come empty-handed." I heard every word. It sounded more like a smug pat on the back than pride. I smiled but not out of joy. I looked at Noah, then at the delivery man. "I'm sorry. I've changed my mind. I'd like to cancel the order." The entire room froze. My mom froze. Noah looked like someone had just thrown ice water in his face. The delivery guy looked slightly confused, but remained professional, and nodded. Okay, there's a 5% cancellation fee, the rest will be refunded within 5 business days. I nodded calmly. It's fine. And then I turned around, leaving behind a room plunged in stunned silence. I didn't need a seat at that table, and I certainly didn't need to buy my place in a family that never had one for me. I thought I had grown used to being overlooked. But that moment, standing in a fancy restaurant, treated like a stranger, shattered every shell of strength I had built. No seat, no place, not even a question if I had eaten. The only thing they asked was, "Where's the gift?" I stood there, still holding my phone. When the delivery guy walked in with the large, silver-wrapped box, the room went dead silent, like someone had flipped a switch. Every eye was on me, on the expensive gift. The $1,300 iPad Pro I once thought would be a beautiful memory for my brother, despite all the injustice of the past. I spoke clearly so the entire room could hear. "Noah, this is your graduation gift." Noah looked up, eyes sparkling in disbelief. "Really? You bought this for me?" My mom beamed, gently squeezing a nearby relative's shoulder. "See, I told you, no matter how mad she gets, she knows her place. She just likes to act cold." I looked at her, then at my dad, who nodded slowly like he'd just been reassured his daughter had finally done the right thing. Then I turned to the delivery man. "I'd like to cancel the order." The man blinked. "Sorry? Cancel the order?" I nodded, my voice steadier than I expected. "That's right, cancel the gift, I don't want to give it anymore." No one said a word, only the faint sound of silverware clinking came from the far end of the table. The delivery man took out his phone, called the store and confirmed the cancellation. After a few minutes he came back. "A 5% fee will be deducted and the rest refunded in 3-5 days. "Perfect, thank you." He nodded politely and left the restaurant. I stood there, facing a storm of shocked, angry, and uncomfortable stares rising around me. Noah slammed his hand on the table, voice sharp. "Are you crazy? You just wanted to humiliate me, didn't you?" I looked at my brother, the one who had been protected like a glass doll, never knowing rejection, never having to wait for anyone to listen. "You already have this whole party, over 60 guests, and a 3-tier cake. If you can't handle not getting a gift from me, maybe the problem lies somewhere else." My dad stood up abruptly, his face red with anger. "Sophie, what do you think you're doing? Do you think making a scene like this is going to get you anything?" My mom wasn't calm anymore. She stood beside me, her voice shrill. "You're being unbelievable. All you had to do was bring a gift and sit down for a meal like a normal person." I looked her straight in the eye. Normal? Like my graduation day, when the whole family brought wilted flowers and made me pay for my own meal? Normal, like today, when I didn't even get a chair but Noah's late friend still got a seat of honor. No one responded, not a single excuse. Just a thick, awkward silence, like I had just ruined a perfectly staged performance. I turned my back. As I walked away, I spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "If I don't have a seat at this table, then I have no reason to buy a gift for someone who's never shared a seat with me." And I left. No rush, no looking back. I didn't go home right away. I drove to a small cafe on the outskirts of Edina, the place I always went when I wanted to disappear from the world. The shop was still open, warm lights casting a soft glow on the worn wooden walls. I ordered an iced espresso, picked a quiet corner in the back, and sat down like I had just taken a boulder off my chest. Soft music played, the smell of coffee lingered in the air like a faint comfort. I didn't feel regret, not one bit. I knew they were probably furious. I knew there'd be heated conversations at home tonight. But I also knew this was just the beginning. Because I had just broken the role they assigned me since I was a child. The quiet daughter. Always polite, always responsible, but never allowed to share anything. For the first time, I didn't do what they expected. And that feeling? It was freeing. I got back to my apartment around 11 p.m. after 3 hours at the cafe, just trying to calm down. I'd thought they'd at least wait until the next day to react, but no. When I opened the door, the living room lights were still on. My mom sat on the sofa, arms crossed, her eyes sharp like knives. My dad leaned against the fireplace, his face heavy like I had just killed someone. I hadn't even taken off my shoes when my mom spoke. "So you finally decided to come home?" I quietly put my bag down, took off my coat and said softly, "I thought you'd be asleep." My dad let out a snort, a laugh laced with contempt. "After the circus you pulled tonight, embarrassing the whole family in front of relatives and friends, then walking in here like nothing happened?" I sat on the edge of the couch, trying to keep my voice calm. "If you call that a circus, then maybe it's time we stop pretending. I'm done playing along." My mom cut in, not even trying to be subtle. "The party tonight cost $4,600. We think the least you can do is pay half." I was stunned. "What? $2,300, my mom repeated. "Consider it compensation for the iPad you canceled." I laughed, not from amusement but from disbelief. So, I was insulted the moment I walked in, given no seat, subtly told to leave the table, treated like an outsider, and now I'm supposed to pay for a dinner I didn't even get to eat? My dad's voice turned harsh. "You're his sister, you should feel responsible for your brother. He was really looking forward to that gift. You ruined his night." I clenched my hands, my knuckles turning white. Do you even know how I felt on my graduation day? No party. No congratulations. No hug. And I had to pay $120 for dinner for the whole family while I was surviving on instant noodles to save money for rent? My mom frowned, her tone ice cold. "You were already earning money then. You had a part-time job, didn't you?" Noah had nothing. "Yes, I earned money. I got scholarships. I worked 3 jobs at once to pay tuition. And because I could take care of myself." "That gave you an excuse not to care?" I turned to my dad, who usually stayed quiet when my mom talked, but this time he sighed and said, almost like a command, "Family is about supporting each other. If you earn more, then sharing is the right thing to do." I stood up, no longer holding back. Support? Sharing? Where was the sharing when I was sick and had to cook for myself? Where was the support when my birthday passed like any other day, while Noah got BBQs, cakes and balloons? All you ever do is demand. Never once asked if I had enough strength to give. My mom stood up and pointed her finger straight at my face. "You're selfish. If you can't even be considerate toward your own brother, how are you going to survive out there in the real world?" I looked her straight in the eye. For the first time in my life, I didn't look away. It's not that I won't give in, it's that I've been giving in my whole life, and today for the first time I stopped. And that's all it takes for you to call me selfish. The living room went silent. But it wasn't the silence of guilt. It was the silence before the next blow. My dad was the one to deliver it. "If you're not willing to help, then stop freeloading in this house." I gave a cold smile. "I pay $1,000 a month to live here, in this old house with no central air, walls so thin I can hear the neighbors cough. And if you want me gone, I'll go." My mom blinked, slightly caught off guard. "Sophie, don't overreact. Things can still be worked out. If you just be a little more flexible." I shook my head. "It's not about being stubborn. It's about finally saying, enough. If every apology comes with a price tag, then that's not family." I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app and showed them the screen. "I'm not paying the $2,300. Not today, not ever." My dad slammed his hand on the table and shouted, "Then get out of my house." I didn't flinch. I wasn't angry, I just turned around and walked to my room. The only thing on my mind was this. They just made the decision for me. I was leaving. Not for revenge, but to finally live on my own terms. I started packing the next morning. No tears, no hesitation. Just one item after another. Clothes, documents, the essentials, folded neatly into 2 suitcases. I didn't have much. Most of my life I'd learned how to live light, unburdened. Maybe, because I never really felt like home was a place I was meant to stay. I had just zipped up the second suitcase when my mom knocked. She didn't wait for me to answer. She walked right in. "Sophie, your dad was a little harsh last night. But, you're calm now, right?" I didn't look up. "Say what you came to say, I'm busy." She cleared her throat, then sat on the edge of the bed like she was preparing for a negotiation. "Your car? The black Honda. Your dad and I were thinking, maybe you could let Noah borrow it for a while? He needs it for job interviews." I stood up straight, laughing like I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. "Borrow it? Just for a few months, he just graduated, he doesn't have an income yet, you're already working." "You don't need it urgently." I crossed my arms. My voice wasn't loud, but it was firm as steel. "I worked and saved for almost 8 months to buy that car. On my own, without borrowing a cent. If Noah needs a car, he can buy it from me. I'm willing to sell. At a fair price." My mom's eyes widened like I had just said something scandalous. "You're going to charge your own brother for a car?" "No, I'm going to charge someone for my car, and if you want to talk about family, fairness starts with not treating me like a walking ATM." I heard my dad's footsteps in the hallway. He stood at the door, eyes dark. "That's too much, Sophie." I turned to him, unflinching. "What's too much is you always using 'he has nothing' as an excuse to make me give up everything. I've stayed silent for long enough." He took a step forward, pointed his finger at me. "If you feel like no one respects you in this house, then get out." I stood still for a few seconds. No reaction, no anger, just a slow nod. "All right, I'll go, and this time, I'm not coming back." I picked up my 2 suitcases and walked down the stairs. My dad said nothing more. My mom called out behind me. "You can't live alone forever. When you need help, don't expect anyone to be there." I stopped at the bottom step, never turning around. If the price of being helped is having to give up my self-respect, then I'd rather face the world alone. I opened the door and rolled my suitcase out. No one saw me off, no words of good luck, just the sound of the door slamming shut behind me. Like a final punctuation mark on 26 years of living in a family I never truly felt I belonged to. I temporarily rented a small room at a roadside motel in Bloomington. $580 a month. Not comfortable, not pretty, but at least it was mine. A place where I could sleep without worrying someone would knock to demand money, or demand the car I bought with my own hard-earned savings. I started planning to change jobs. My old office was too far away, and I knew I needed a clean break. No shared addresses, nowhere they could drop by unannounced. Just a few days after I left, Noah called. I let the phone ring 5 times before picking up. "What you did was too much. Mom and Dad are really mad." "Oh?" I leaned back against the wall, my voice light as a breeze. "They're mad because they couldn't get the car, right?" Noah was quiet for a moment, then lowered his voice. "You know I need it to go to job interviews. Why do you have to make everything a big deal?" I closed my eyes, letting out a soft laugh. "Noah, you had an entire graduation party that cost nearly $5,000. You've been pampered your whole life, forgiven for bad grades, praised just for trying. This car is the one thing I get to keep for myself, and you know what? I'm keeping it. No matter what." Noah said nothing, not a word. I hung up. I knew that call would reach my mom within the hour, and I also knew the real battle had just begun. I woke up the next morning in a cheap hotel room, thin curtains failing to block the sunlight slipping through every crack in the window. No more stomping footsteps on the old wooden floor, no more mom shouting from the kitchen, no more tightness in my chest every time I walked down the stairs. Just silence. Cold. And strangely, I felt at peace. The motel I stayed in was in the South Loop area, near the I-35W freeway, a run-down, damp place, but I didn't have many options. $70 a night, a small room, stained walls, a bathroom with a rusty faucet. But at least here, I knew for sure no one had a spare key to come in without knocking. I spent the first 2 days just sleeping, eating cup noodles and staying silent. No social media, no messages. I turned off my phone every night, like I was trying to erase the outside world. I needed to disconnect before I could start rooting myself somewhere new. On the third day, I started looking for an apartment. I didn't need anything fancy, just a small kitchen, decent heating, and a quiet enough space where I could breathe without feeling smothered. After 12 phone calls and 5 viewings, I found a one-bedroom apartment in West St. Paul, $500 a month, utilities included. The apartment was on the second floor of a 3-story old building, no elevator. The hardwood floors were slightly warped. The white paint on the walls had turned cream with age, but the window overlooked a sunlit empty lawn. I stood in the middle of the empty room, afternoon light streaming through the glass, casting long shadows on the floor, and, for the first time in my life, I whispered to myself, "This is my home." I moved in the very next day. No furniture, no decorations, just 2 suitcases, an air mattress I rushed to buy at Target, and a plastic folding table. I didn't need more. Every item I brought in had one purpose only. I chose it for me. Not to please anyone, not because someone told me to. It took me almost a week to clean, retape peeling wall edges, replace the curtains, and buy a small bookshelf. I planted a pot of lavender on the windowsill. The scent reminded me of the old backyard, but no longer tied to bitter memories. I started learning how to live alone, from scratch. Setting my own alarm clock. Making breakfast by myself, fried eggs and toast. Choosing whether or not I wanted to talk to anyone that day. I rescheduled my remote work with the company, paused side projects, and only took on tasks enough to cover my living expenses. No more pushing myself to earn as much as possible, no more calculating the part to send back home. Now, every dollar I earned was mine. I was no longer someone else's money machine. At night, I read books. The ones I used to hesitate to buy, fearing they'd be called a waste of money. I watched movies on my laptop, wrapped in a blanket on the living room floor, laughing out loud without anyone scolding me for being too noisy for a girl. I wrote in my journal, wrote letters to my 10-year-old self, to tell that little girl, "We made it out." And I began learning to forgive. Not because they deserved it, but because I didn't want to carry that anger into this new space. Every time I went grocery shopping alone, I no longer heard, "Why didn't you get some for Noah too?" Every time I turned off my phone at 10 p.m., I wasn't woken up by mom shouting, "Sophie, remember to take your brother to school tomorrow." I had broken the endless cycle. An exhausting loop of unrecognized sacrifices. 6 weeks after I left home, I received an email from Noah. No greeting, no apology, just one single line. "How are you doing? I need to borrow some money." I didn't reply. I wasn't angry, I just clicked archive and shut my laptop. I looked out the window. The lavender pot was in full bloom, glowing purple in the golden light of late afternoon. No one standing behind me. No voice pushing me to live by their expectations. I took a deep breath. For the first time in 26 years, freedom wasn't just a concept. It smelled like sunshine, tasted like morning coffee, and sounded like soft jazz, echoing through my little apartment. I wasn't surprised when they came back. I was just surprised it took them 3 months to reach out. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was at my usual cafe near the apartment, the one with a warm corner seat by the window, dark roast coffee and soft music, when my phone rang. My mom's name lit up the screen, and my chest tightened for a second. Then I answered. Like a test. To see if I'd gotten strong enough. Her voice was sweet, too sweet to be real. "Sophie, I miss you, it's been a while. Are you doing okay?" I didn't respond right away. Every word she spoke was sugar-coated, but the bitter medicine beneath was all too familiar. "What do you want?" I asked plainly. She hesitated a bit, then said lightly, as if talking about buying a carton of milk. "Your dad, Noah, and we'd like to see you. There's something we need to talk about. You know, family stuff." I nodded, not because I softened, but because I wanted to hear them say what I already knew. They needed money again. We met Monday evening at a small Italian restaurant in downtown St. Paul. I arrived on time. My mom wore a new sweater, hair neatly curled. My dad had already ordered a drink, acting like a busy man doing someone a favor. And Noah, still the eternal boy in their eyes, but this time in a dress shirt and tie, trying hard to look grown up. I sat down. No greetings. No smile. Good. My dad glanced at my mom, then looked at me, his voice gravelly but forced calm. Noah has a great business idea. He wants to open a modern cafe, open space, live music, handcrafted pastries. We were thinking, if you could loan him $50,000, then... Loan? I cut him off. Or just give it to him. No one answered. I turned to Noah. Do you have any experience in business, management, finance? Noah gave a sheepish grin. I'm passionate. I've got a detailed plan. If you help me with the capital, I can start right away. I leaned on the table, looking each of them in the eye. All right, you want to borrow $50,000? I'll lend it, no interest. But under one condition. All three of them leaned in slightly, eyes lighting up. But I wasn't done. Mom and Dad will sign a formal loan agreement and put up the house as collateral. If Noah doesn't pay it back within 12 months, the house becomes mine. The room's warmth dropped instantly, like someone turned off the heat in the middle of a Minnesota winter. My dad slowly put his glass down, fingers tightening, voice hissing through clenched teeth. What the hell are you saying? I'm talking about responsibility and security, I said firmly. If Noah's serious, and if you believe in him, there's no reason not to sign the agreement. My mom winced. You can't ask us to mortgage the house. We've lived there our whole lives. And I lived there too, my whole life, I replied without hesitation. Treated like I didn't exist. If you want my money, it has to come with something of equal value in return. Noah stammered. I didn't think you'd be so... calculating. I smirked. You didn't calculate. That's why you expect others to take the risk for you. But I'm not like that anymore, Noah. I'm no longer the naive daughter who believes in unconditional family loyalty. My dad slammed his hand on the table, knocking his water glass over. You're ungrateful. All you care about is yourself. What kind of person are you, Sophie? You're not my daughter anymore. I calmly stood up and wiped the spilled water off my coat. That's your choice. Convenient, actually, because I never truly felt like your daughter in that house anyway. I walked out, past the three stunned faces, leaving behind a cold, untouched meal, and a truth they never wanted to face. I was no longer part of the circle they used to bind me for 26 years. I thought they'd come back, try to beg or bargain again, but they didn't. After that night at the Italian restaurant, when my dad shouted, "You're not my daughter anymore," the whole family went silent, as if I had never existed. No calls, no messages, no one knocking on my door. And I didn't need them anymore. 3 months passed. Summer gave way to early fall. My small apartment now felt cozy with a few second-hand furniture pieces I'd picked up from the thrift market. A walnut bookshelf, a small dining table for two, and a moss-green armchair that I cherished more than any gift my mother had ever given me. I lived peacefully in my own little world. No demands, no intrusions. Each morning I woke up early, jogged around Harriet Park, brewed coffee, listened to podcasts, and worked remotely. I had never felt life this light before. Until one Saturday afternoon, when I was picking tomatoes at the farmer's market, and ran into Emily, my paternal cousin. We were never close, but we kept polite contact. Christmas cards, birthday wishes on social media. When she saw me, she froze, sighing like she had just seen a ghost. "Sophie, you haven't heard?" I looked up, slightly frowning. "Heard what?" Emily glanced around nervously, as if afraid someone might overhear, then whispered, "About Noah, and your parents." I didn't respond, but my gaze made it clear I expected a full explanation. She exhaled, her tone dropping. "Noah's cafe shut down. It only lasted not even 3 months. Huge losses. No customers. Completely in debt. I stayed silent. No surprise. No pity. Just a quiet confirmation. I had been right. Your parents, Emily continued, had to sell the house to cover his debt. It's been listed for over a month. Word is, they're looking for a cheaper place to rent further out. I nodded, a small gesture like I was reacting to the weather rather than the collapse of an entire family. Emily looked at me as if trying to guess whether I'd cry, rage, or gloat. But I only asked one question. Did they try to contact me? Emily paused for a few seconds, then shook her head. No, no one mentioned you. It's like you never existed. I laughed. A dry, cold laugh. Then they've finally done what they always quietly wished for. Living a life without me. Emily bit her lip, as if she wanted to say something more but didn't. I picked out a few tomatoes, placed them in my cloth bag and paid. Before leaving, I turned and said gently, if they ask, tell them I'm fine, doing very well, and not planning to come back. That night I sat alone in my little kitchen, candlelight flickering on the dining table. I made something simple, spaghetti with tomato sauce and meatballs. I played jazz music, opened the window to let the crisp autumn air and its scent drift in. No arguments, no guilt trips, no demands. Just what I chose. I thought about the old house. The one I grew up in, always in the shadow of my younger brother. Where every move I made was scrutinized, every effort undervalued. Every word labeled disrespectful. Now that house was up for sale. The walls I once cried against, the stairs I once climbed with heavy disappointment, would soon belong to someone else. And I didn't feel sad. Not at all. Because I had gotten out. No longer trying to please anyone, no longer the responsible older sister, the sacrificial eldest, or the daughter who never measured up. I am Sophie, 26, free, independent, and at peace. I know some people will judge me, say I turned my back on blood, that I should have helped my brother, that I shouldn't have walked away when my parents were struggling. But they never lived in that house. They didn't witness nearly 3 decades of me being pushed to the sidelines. I don't hate Noah, I just refuse to take responsibility for the failure he chose. I don't hate my parents. I simply refuse to carry the weight of a so-called family bond that was nothing more than a noose around my neck. And if anyone asks, Sophie, will you ever go back? The answer will always be no. From Sophie's story, I've come to realize that not every family is a safe place. When love is conditional on one-sided sacrifice and exploitation, we have the right to walk away and protect ourselves. Freedom doesn't come from being accepted. It comes from the moment you dare to say enough to long-standing injustice. Sophie didn't abandon anyone. She just stopped abandoning herself. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away. And start a life that's truly your own. What do you think about Sophie's decision? Was she too harsh, or was it exactly what she needed to protect herself? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss more emotional true life stories like this one. I always wondered what it felt like to be the golden child in a family, to be admired by your parents, surrounded by relatives without having to try too hard. But I never had the chance to experience that. In their eyes, I was nothing more than a shadow, a failure not good enough to be acknowledged. Meanwhile, my brother Henry was the shining star, the pride of the family, even though, in reality, he was just a braggart thriving on empty praise. We grew up in a small town in Ohio where everyone knew each other's business. My reputation as the kid with no future stuck with me from an early age, while Henry was cherished like an invincible warrior. From the start, my parents placed Henry on a pedestal. He played football in high school, scored a few touchdowns, and suddenly became the pride of the entire family. And me? I was the dreamy-eyed kid who preferred books over sports competitions. My father, Richard, was the kind of man who spent his life working tirelessly but never expressed his true feelings. He woke up at 5 a.m., drove to the construction site and returned home in silence, only muttering a few grumbles if dinner wasn't ready. He never hit me, but his silence was sometimes more terrifying than words. My mother, Eleanor, was a different story. She lived by traditional values. A model mother molded by the expectations she had been taught since childhood. To her, a real son had to be strong, have a family, and succeed in the way she deemed right. And Henry was the perfect embodiment of all those standards. Henry is now in his 30s, working a steady job at a local car dealership. People still call him a successful man, an ideal role model to compare me to. He has a big house with a neatly trimmed lawn, a quiet wife named Rachel, and 2 boys who constantly run around with footballs in their hands. My family worships Henry's image, endlessly talking about his achievements as if he were some renowned politician. And me? In their eyes, I am nothing. They think I can't stand on my own, can't succeed without help. They tell me I need to try harder, to learn from my brother. But the truth is, no matter what I do, they will never acknowledge me. Even when I worked hard, saved every penny to get into college, my decision to drop out in my 2nd year was seen as proof of my failure. I also have a younger sister, Olivia, the little princess of the family. She got married at 20 and now has 3 kids. I don't remember much about Olivia when we were younger, but when we reconnected later, I realized she was just like our parents and Henry. Olivia wasn't cruel, but perhaps to secure her place in the family, she followed their lead, treating me as a pitiful failure. Sunday dinners were the worst part of the week. I'd drive nearly 2 hours just to hear them talk about Henry, Olivia's new house, who just bought a new car or who got promoted. If I mentioned my job, they'd ignore it or change the subject. They still thought I worked at the old comic book store from years ago, even though it had closed down a decade ago. And Henry, as always, would pat me on the shoulder and say in that grating voice, "Mela, you need to have a plan for the future. You can't keep drifting through life like this." I'd smirk. If they knew the truth about me, maybe things would be different. But I never said anything. Because even if I did, they wouldn't believe me. I was used to being overlooked, used to being seen as a failure. But what they didn't know was that I was no longer the weak child they once dismissed. I had my own life, my own career, and my own success. They just hadn't realized it yet. My childhood wasn't filled with warm family memories or cozy gatherings around the dinner table. It was a series of endless comparisons, belittlement, and being made to feel less than. When you grow up in a family where your worth is measured against someone else's achievements, you learn one thing. No matter how hard you try, you will never be good enough. From an early age, I was different from Henry. He was strong, athletic, winning medals in school tournaments. Every time he scored in a game, my family would cheer. My father would clap him on the back with a proud smile. And me? I never got a chance to make my parents proud in that way. I had asthma, which meant I couldn't participate in sports like Henry. I hated gym class, hated the long runs outside, hated the laughter of the boys when they saw me gasping for air, my face pale as if I were about to pass out. Every time I struggled to breathe, my mother would sigh and say, "Amelia, you need to be stronger, stop making things so complicated." Stronger? No matter how much I tried to push through, in her eyes I would always be a disappointment. But perhaps the worst part wasn't the illness, it was the constant comparisons to Henry. If he was the pride, then what was I? Nothing. I wasn't great in school, not terrible, but my GPA hovered around 2.5. Not enough to impress anyone. Henry, on the other hand, wasn't a stellar student either, but he always knew how to make things seem bigger than they were. "Henry isn't just talented, he has leadership qualities," my father once said when Henry was made team captain. And me? I was just the girl sitting in the library reading comic books, dismissed as someone lost in a useless fantasy world. After high school, I tried to do what was expected of me, go to college. I paid for tuition by working part-time at a small comic book and gaming store in town. To me, it was a dream job, surrounded by things I loved, meeting people who shared my interests. But to my family, it was the perfect symbol of my failure. "Do you really want to spend your whole life working in a store that sells kids' stuff?" my mother asked as she watched me put on my uniform one evening. I didn't respond. I knew that no matter what I said, she wouldn't understand. After 2 years in college, I dropped out. I couldn't stand the uninspiring classes, the constant criticism from my family, and the feeling that I was wasting my time on something that wasn't meant for me. To my family, that was the end of the road. They never said it outright, but I saw it in their eyes. "You think dropping out was a smart decision?" my father asked coldly. "Henry has had a stable job for years, why can't you learn from him?" For the first time in my life, I felt like I had truly disappeared from the family picture. They didn't care how I felt, didn't bother to ask why I left college. All they saw was a failure. A faint shadow, not worth expecting anything from. What they didn't know was that this decision was where my life truly began. After leaving college, I continued working at the comic book store, but not just to get by. I met a friend who shared my passion for technology, and together we started a small IT company. The early days were brutal. We worked tirelessly, and there were months when we barely made any money. But we kept going. And then, everything changed. Our company grew faster than we ever expected. We landed major contracts, expanded, and within just a few years, it became a valuable business. When we sold the company to a large corporation, I walked away from the deal with a sizable sum, an amount my family could never have imagined. I could live lavishly if I wanted to, but I didn't. I didn't need a mansion, didn't need a sports car to prove anything to anyone. I bought a modest 2-bedroom home, comfortable but not flashy. I drove an old car I loved, even if others saw it as a sign of failure. They had no idea what I had accomplished. They didn't know how much money was in my bank account. Because in their eyes, I was still the useless little sister. But one day the truth would come out, and I was very curious to see how they would react when they realized that the failure they had always looked down on was actually the most successful person in the family. I had no idea how Henry managed to live with such an inflated ego without being crushed under its weight. His whole life he wore the perfect mask, the model man, the golden child, the successful older brother. But I knew the truth. Henry had never truly succeeded in the way he bragged about. He might have fooled our parents, might have convinced the whole town that he was some role model, but I had always seen the cracks in the facade he built. And then, one day, that facade crumbled. I had no idea Henry had hired a private investigator to track me. He had never hidden his contempt for me. But paying someone just to prove I was a failure? That was new. I found out by accident. One day I received an alert about unauthorized access to my credit reports. I worked in cybersecurity. I wasn't unfamiliar with the signs of a personal investigation. Someone had been digging too deep into my financial records, and I knew this wasn't a coincidence. It didn't take long to trace it back. The detective agency Henry hired wasn't careful enough to cover their tracks completely. With just a little effort, I found out who had commissioned the investigation. And when I saw Henry's name, I wasn't even surprised. He had always been searching for proof that I was a failure, but this time, he had only hurt himself. I wasn't sure how prepared Henry was to face the truth, but I was certain he didn't expect the outcome he got. Instead of uncovering that I was still the useless little sister working at some comic book shop, the investigator he hired unearthed the entire truth. I wasn't a failure. I wasn't struggling. I wasn't some loser clinging to the past. I was the co-founder of a successful tech company. I had over $1 million in assets. I owned a beautiful home in a desirable neighborhood, and most importantly, I didn't need my family's approval. Whether Henry liked it or not, the information made its way to my parents. For the first time in my life, I saw them look at me differently. Not with disappointment. Not with the constant frustration they always seemed to have whenever I showed up at family dinners. But with shock. They no longer looked at me like a daughter who needed help. They no longer saw me as an embarrassment. Suddenly, I had become someone worth noticing. Amelia, why didn't you ever tell me about your success? My mother asked with an awkward smile, as if she was trying to act happy for me. I shrugged. Did you ever care? My father, the man who had never shown much emotion, looked unsettled. He cleared his throat and nodded slowly. You've done very well. That was probably the first compliment I had ever received from him in nearly 30 years of existence. But the most interesting reaction didn't come from my parents. It came from Henry. Henry couldn't accept the fact that I, the little sister he had always looked down on, had become more successful than him. At the next family dinner, he tried to reclaim his dignity. My sister is very talented, but selling cars is a great career too. He folded his arms, trying to sound confident. In fact, just last month, I sold the most expensive car at the dealership. No one reacted. My mother was still busy processing the numbers she had learned about my assets. My father remained silent as usual, and Olivia, my younger sister, simply stared at Henry without saying a word. But Henry didn't stop there. My house was recently appraised higher than expected, and I have a solid financial plan. I might even invest in real estate. I couldn't help but laugh. He was scrambling, desperately clinging to anything that could maintain his status. I met his eyes, steady and unprovoked. Are you sure about that, Henry? He froze. I tilted my head. Because from what I know, you have 3 unpaid mortgages, outstanding tax debt with the IRS, and your credit score is plummeting. The silence in the room became suffocating. Henry's fists clenched, his jaw tightened. I could see the flicker of rage in his eyes, but he couldn't do anything about it. For the first time in my life, I had a voice. And Henry knew it. No one in my family truly understood what it felt like to have your privacy violated, but I did. Henry hiring a private investigator to dig into my life wasn't just an insult. It was a clear declaration that he had never seen me as a person with real worth. To him, I was still the failure he needed to expose, so everyone would see that I wasn't worth admiring. He was wrong. And I was going to show him. I hired the same detective agency he had used to turn the tables on him. I wanted to know if Henry was as perfect as he always claimed to be. The results exceeded my expectations. When I walked into my parents' house that Sunday evening, the atmosphere in the dining room was different. My mother busied herself with the casserole, my father silently read his newspaper as usual, and Henry sat with his arms crossed, wearing a smug expression like he had just won an important game. I knew why. He thought he had won, that now that my parents knew I was wealthy, I would be pulled back into the family circle, expected to share what I had. I pulled out my chair and sat down, keeping my face neutral, but inside I was fully prepared for the storm ahead. Dinner began the same way it always did, with stories about Henry. Your brother just hit his highest sales target this month, my mother announced proudly. Really? I replied with a small smile, casually placing a piece of meat on my plate. That's impressive, Henry. Quite the achievement. Henry shot me a wary glance. I had never shown interest in his bragging before, and I was sure he sensed something different tonight. Everything went exactly as I expected. After a while, Henry couldn't hold back anymore. You know, Amelia? He leaned forward, smirking. Money isn't everything. What matters is reputation, the respect a man earns in society. I set my fork down and looked up at him. Oh? And how's your reputation doing? Henry frowned. What do you mean? I slowly pulled a thick envelope from my bag and placed it in front of him. You're not the only one who knows how to hire a private investigator, Henry. The room tensed immediately. Henry stiffened, but he tried to maintain his composure. What nonsense are you talking about? I tilted my head, calmly opening the envelope and pulling out each document. 3 unpaid mortgages, tax debt with the IRS, a credit score barely hanging on. I read off each item one by one. Oh, and this one. A file from Child Protective Services. Would you like to explain why your name is on it? Henry slammed his hand on the table. Shut up, Amelia. My parents were stunned. My mother clutched her chest, staring at my brother in horror as if she had never truly known who he was. "Henry, what is this about?" she asked, her voice trembling. He didn't answer right away. I could see the panic in his eyes, the frantic search for an escape from the trap he had set for himself. I met his gaze, my voice calm but sharp. "You invaded my privacy just to prove that I was a failure. But it turns out you're the one with the real problems." Henry suddenly shot up from his chair, jabbing a finger at me in rage. "You're just trying to bring me down, you've always been jealous of me." I let out a cold, short laugh. "Jealous? Henry, there is nothing about you that I would ever envy." He slammed his fist on the table again. "You shouldn't have been born. I've carried this family on my back my whole life, while you've been nothing but useless." My mother gasped and grabbed his arm. "Henry! Don't say that!" For the first time that evening my father spoke. "Both of you, calm down." But it was too late. Henry's fury had completely erupted. He turned to my parents, his voice shaking with anger. "You've never been fair. Never!" he shouted. "Why is it that the moment Amelia shows up with some money, you suddenly change your attitude? What about me? I did everything right. I got married, had kids, built a career. And now you're all worshipping her?" A heavy silence filled the room. For the first time, I saw my parents truly at a loss for words. And I knew then that things would never go back to the way they were. I drove away from my parents' house that night, my mind spinning with too many thoughts. There was no music playing from the radio like usual, no street noises distracting me. Just a suffocating silence, wrapped around me along with a truth that had always been there. One I had never dared to fully face. My parents had never truly loved me. They loved the idea of a child who could bring them pride, wealth, and admiration from society. They loved the image of a perfect family more than they loved the people within it. And now, when they realized I had money, their attitude shifted instantly. Not because they suddenly saw my worth, but because I had something they could use. Since childhood, I had always been the target of favoritism. Henry could do anything and still be forgiven, while, no matter how hard I tried, I was always pushed to the sidelines. I remembered the times he shoved me to the ground when we were kids, the punches thrown when no adults were watching, the times I was humiliated in front of his friends. And my parents? They never protected me. They told me it was just kids playing around, that I should toughen up, that Henry was only trying to make me stronger. But that wasn't guidance. That was abuse, disguised with weak excuses. And now, as Henry stood on the edge of his own downfall, they were terrified. Not because of what he had done, but because, for the first time, the truth about him could no longer be hidden. I had spent my entire life trying to make them see me, but tonight, I realized I had never truly existed in their eyes. And it was time for me to stop trying. I woke up the next morning feeling a strange sense of relief. It wasn't joy, nor satisfaction. Just the simple, undeniable feeling of having set down a burden I had carried for 30 years. I no longer blamed them. I no longer sought their approval. And more importantly, I no longer let them have control over my life. I picked up my phone and sent a message to my mother. "Mom, I won't be coming to Sunday dinners anymore. I need space to process everything. When I'm ready, I'll reach out." I didn't expect an apology from her. And as expected, her reply was short and dismissive. "You're overreacting, Amelia. Family should come first." I didn't respond. I simply set my phone down and went on with my day, letting her words roll off me. But I knew this wasn't over. I knew my parents wouldn't let this go. And I needed to prepare myself for what was coming next. 3 days later, I sat across from my therapist, Dr. Bennett. I had been seeing her for years, but for the first time, I felt the need to lay everything out. "They only want me now because I have money," I sighed, crossing my arms as I sank into the familiar chair. Dr. Bennett nodded slowly. "And how does that make you feel?" I was silent for a moment. Then, I let out a small, bitter laugh. "Honestly, relieved. I don't have to prove myself to them anymore." She tilted her head, observing me. Then what's still making you tense? I took a deep breath. I know they won't leave me alone. They'll keep trying to pull me back in, keep manipulating me with that fake sense of family love. So what do you want to do? I looked her in the eye, and for the first time in my life, I knew the answer. I'm going to set boundaries. I won't let them use me anymore. I started changing the way I interacted with my family. I no longer responded immediately to my mother's guilt-tripping messages. I didn't engage in the long, drawn-out phone calls where my parents tried to convince me to reconsider. And most importantly, I didn't let them manipulate me with talk about how family is everything. I also started focusing on myself more. I spent time enjoying the life I had built for myself. I surrounded myself with people who truly respected me. People who didn't need me to prove my worth through money or success. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. I knew there would be hard days ahead. I knew Henry wouldn't accept defeat easily, that my parents would keep trying to pull me back into their orbit. But this time, I was ready. I had spent my whole life trying to earn their approval. But now, I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need them to define my worth. And that was what truly mattered. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt truly free. Maybe it was when I was very young, before I realized my family's favoritism, before I understood that no matter how hard I tried, I would never be valued like Henry. But now, I was taking back control of my life. One step at a time. A life no longer suffocated by unrealistic expectations or judgmental stares from people who were supposed to love me. And then, just as I was starting to reshape myself, Luca appeared. The cybersecurity conference in San Francisco was an event I had almost skipped. If it weren't for a colleague convincing me that it was a great opportunity for networking, I probably would have stayed home, curled up on my couch with a book. But I went. And it turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made. Luca was the keynote speaker at a seminar on personal cybersecurity. He wasn't just knowledgeable, he had a rare confidence that commanded the room. His deep, steady voice, his sharp eyes, he captivated everyone with every word. But what struck me the most wasn't his expertise. It was the way he talked about personal boundaries. We protect our data, but we allow people to invade our personal space so easily. Boundaries aren't about distance. They're about protection. That sentence hit me like a wake-up call, shaking me out of my hesitation. After the seminar, I gathered the courage to approach Luca. I wasn't the type to start conversations with strangers, but something about him made me feel safe. We talked about work, about the flaws in the cybersecurity industry, about how people often protected their information better than they protected themselves. And before I knew it, we were sitting across from each other in a quiet corner of a coffee shop outside the conference center, drinking coffee together. You seem like someone who keeps their distance from everything, Luca observed, taking a sip of his espresso. I laughed. Not exactly. I've just spent my whole life being forced into someone else's mold. Now I'm just trying to take back control, so I'm not constantly being managed. Luca nodded, his eyes full of understanding. I get that. Sometimes the most important thing isn't cutting people off. It's learning how to manage relationships on your own terms. He didn't know it, but with just one sentence, he had given me the answer I had been searching for all along. My relationship with Luca developed naturally. We spent time together without pressure, without expectations. He wasn't just someone who listened. He helped me see things from a new perspective. You don't have to disappear from your family's life, Luca said one evening as we sat on his balcony, looking out at the city below. You just need to set boundaries. They may not like it, but they'll have to accept it. So I tried. I didn't cut ties with my parents like I once thought I would, but I also didn't let them manipulate me anymore. Instead of long, exhausting dinners where I was put on the defensive, I suggested short coffee meetups in places where I could control the situation. At first, my mother resisted. Families don't meet in coffee shops, Amelia. That's not how we do things. I simply replied, then you have a choice. You can meet me this way, or not see me at all. For the first time in my life, she seemed to understand that I was no longer the Amelia they could bend to their will. At first, the short meetings were tense. My mother kept trying to lure me back into Sunday dinners, my father remained quietly observant, and Henry refused to show up at all. But over time, they began to accept reality. The conversations became shorter, with fewer criticisms, no more forced questions about marriage, no more meaningless comparisons to Henry. And the most important part? I no longer felt suffocated. I no longer needed to prove anything to them. I no longer felt the need to fight for their recognition. I simply existed, as myself, on my own terms. Luca was right. I didn't need to cut my family off. I just needed to control the relationship on my own terms. One evening, as I sat on the balcony with Luca, he turned to me, his eyes reflecting the city lights. "Do you feel better?" I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. Yes. For the first time in my life, I feel truly free, in a way that I choose. I didn't know when distancing myself from my family had started bringing me so much peace. The short coffee meetings, the fewer phone calls, the messages I no longer felt pressured to reply to immediately, all were signs of a change. A change I knew was necessary. My mother still tried to pull me back into the old dynamic. She sent subtle messages, reminders about family responsibilities, and how family bonds are irreplaceable. But the difference was, I no longer felt guilty for refusing. I understood now that family should not be a chain that binds. If I had to sacrifice my mental well-being just to maintain a relationship, then that wasn't real family. Henry, as I had predicted, still couldn't accept the truth. He never showed up for any meetings, never responded to my messages, and even went out of his way to avoid me when possible. It didn't bother me. I knew his pride was too big to face me after the truth about his life had been exposed. Maybe one day, he would find a way to regain balance. But that was no longer my concern. I no longer let my family define my worth. My life moved forward, but this time, I wasn't walking alone. Luca and I spent more time together, and with each passing day, I realized he understood me better than anyone ever had. Not because he tried to change me, but because he accepted me exactly as I was. One crisp autumn evening, we sat on the balcony of his apartment, sipping red wine as we looked out over the city. "Have you ever thought about starting a family?" Luca asked, his deep voice steady. I smiled softly, swirling the wine in my glass. "I think about it more than you'd expect." He tilted his head slightly, waiting for me to continue. I took a deep breath. For most of my life, I thought family was a burden. Something that trapped you, controlled you, made you lose yourself. But now, I understand that family doesn't have to be that way. Family can be something we build, not something we are forced to accept. Luca smiled, gently taking my hand. Exactly. I met his eyes, and for the first time, I truly felt ready for a new future. A future not overshadowed by the past, but one where I could freely choose my own path. I used to think success meant making my parents proud. I used to chase that idea, only to realize they would never see me the way I had hoped. Now, I understood that success wasn't about earning their approval. Success was waking up each morning without the weight of expectations crushing my chest. It was choosing relationships that brought me peace instead of ones that dragged me down. I didn't need my parents' validation to feel worthy. I didn't need to prove myself to Henry. I didn't need to be some perfect version of myself just to be accepted. I just needed to be me. And that was enough. I continued seeing my therapist regularly, not because I was weak, but because I understood that mental health was just as important as physical health. Dr. Bennett helped me realize that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, it was necessary. I learned to say no without feeling guilty. I learned to put myself first without fearing judgment. I learned to love without letting others take advantage of my kindness. And most importantly, I learned to keep moving forward without looking back. I still kept a certain distance from my family. I was no longer the daughter who showed up every Sunday, sitting through empty lectures or being compared to Henry. But I didn't disappear entirely either. The coffee meetings continued, but I no longer let them affect me. I expected nothing from them. And because of that, I no longer felt disappointed. I wasn't sure what the future would hold. I didn't know if Henry would ever change. I couldn't say for certain that one day my mother would truly accept me for who I was. But I knew one thing. I was living the life I chose. I had a career I loved. I had an incredible partner. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. As I sat next to Luca in a small cafe on a late afternoon, my hand wrapped around his, I knew I was no longer the Amelia of the past. I was no longer the child seeking approval from people who never truly cared. I was myself. And that was more than enough. Amelia's story is not just about breaking free from family control, it's a lesson in self-worth. In reality, many people find themselves trapped by family expectations and manipulation, forgetting that true happiness doesn't come from external validation, but from inner peace. Amelia teaches us that sometimes, walking away from toxic relationships and setting boundaries is the best way to reclaim ourselves. Success isn't about pleasing everyone, it's about living in alignment with our own values. What do you think about Amelia's story? If you've ever experienced something similar, how would you handle it? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more stories about life, family, and the journey to self-discovery. I wasn't invited to my own sister's wedding. Not because I caused drama, and not because I live somewhere remote and unreachable. But because I'm a source of trouble, according to my mom. A polite way of saying I'd been cut out of the family without an official announcement. My sister's text came one afternoon like any other, but when I read it, I felt my heart drop to the floor. My name is Morgan. I'm 32 years old, a regular older brother. Nothing special, except for always being the one to clean up the messes my family left behind. My teenage years were all about patching up the holes my sister Haley, now 28, left every time she stumbled. Whether it was a breakup, losing a job, or just being bored and lost, Haley always called me. And I always showed up. And now, I'm left out of her wedding. Haley's message was short and fake. Hey, just letting you know the guest list is finalized, we had to cut a lot, hope you understand. Love you. Understand? I'm not a distant cousin no one's seen in 10 years. I'm not some old classmate she kept around out of politeness. I'm her brother. The one who drove across state lines to bring her home after she was dumped. The one who covered her rent when her bank account was empty. The one who stayed up at night listening to her cry about work stress. And now I'm being tossed aside like I'm a stranger. I stared at my screen. At first I thought there had to be a mistake, that this was some dumb joke. But then, when I called Mom, everything became painfully clear. She picked up after 2 rings, her voice was unusually cheerful. Morgan, sweetheart, what's going on? I didn't beat around the bush. I just got a message from Haley. She said the guest list is finalized and I'm not on it. What's going on? There was a suspicious pause. Then Mom sighed. That kind of sigh that always made me feel like a kid overreacting. Oh, Morgan, don't make a big deal out of it. It's just a wedding. It's just a wedding? I felt my chest tighten. I'm her brother, Mom. How could I not be invited? She clicked her tongue. That sound that always drove me crazy. It's nothing personal, sweetheart. Haley and Jeremy have to save money. Everything's so expensive now. Everyone has to compromise a little. I tried to stay calm. Mom, I just saw Haley's post on Instagram. She booked a fancy banquet hall in San Diego. Over 120 guests. Even her high school friends are invited. Am I worth less than them? Her voice suddenly turned firm. You're overreacting, Morgan. Don't let this little thing hurt you. Hurt myself? No, Mom got it wrong. This wasn't the first time I'd been treated like my presence was optional. I was used to being overlooked. But this time, I wasn't staying quiet. I didn't argue. I didn't beg to be reinvited. I hung up. And for the first time in my life, I decided. If they don't need me, I don't need them. I opened my laptop and pulled up a travel site. If Haley thought I'd just sit at home moping on her wedding day, she was dead wrong. I was going far, really far. I was going to take the vacation of a lifetime. And for the first time in years, I was going to put myself first. I used to think, if I was just good enough, patient enough, there would come a day I'd be appreciated. But the more I think back, the more I realize I was just a shadow. Always there when needed, always gone when things got better. No one ever asked if I was tired. No one ever stopped to say thank you. Haley has always been emotional, impulsive, and blindly trusting in relationships. I still remember the night she was 22, crying like crazy on the side of the road after some guy she'd dated for 3 months dumped her cold. A time, I was on a night shift at the hospital, 14 straight hours in the ER. But when I got her call at 1 a.m., I dropped everything and drove straight from Riverside to Santa Monica. She was curled up on the curb, makeup smeared, eyes red, clutching a half-empty bottle of cheap wine. I wrapped her in my jacket and took her back to my tiny apartment, where I was still sharing a room with a buddy. A few months later, she lost her job at a cafe, chronic lateness. She called me in a panic, crying that she didn't have enough to pay rent. I didn't have much, but I wired her $900, the money I'd saved for next semester's tuition. I had to postpone my lab course, but I didn't regret it. Because back then, I thought, that's what a brother is supposed to do. Then came Ryan, the pretty brainless marketing guy. Mom adored him like a Hallmark movie character. He really loves Haley, she'd say, even though it was obvious he was just using her credit card. Haley was blinded, and I was the bad guy for warning her. And when he cleaned out her apartment and vanished without a trace, who drove 3 hours to San Diego to pick his sister up off the living room floor? And what did Mom say? Morgan, don't be hard on her. Haley's sensitive. You're her brother, you should understand. Right. It was always me who had to understand. Haley never had to understand anyone. Every time she messed up, Mom found a way to justify it. Haley's still young. Haley's not as strong as you. Haley just needs a little more time. 10 years passed, and that little more time turned me into an unconditional lifeline. She called me when she lost her phone, when she needed to book a doctor's appointment, even just to ask which dress to wear for an interview. I was always there. Always listening. But when I spent a week in the hospital with appendicitis, who came to visit? No one. Even my mom, who poured love into Haley like an overflowing glass, only called me once, and ended the call with, I thought you were used to pain by now, Morgan. Something inside me began to rot. From that moment, I started to pull back, stopped talking, stopped sharing. But I kept helping, kept carrying the load. Because I thought it was the right thing to do. I thought if I just kept loving them, they'd see it. But the truth is, love is never enough when someone decides to ignore it from the beginning. And now, they weren't just ignoring it. They cut me out completely. As if I were some unnecessary side character in their life story. They didn't invite me. Didn't mention me. And when I reacted, my mom had the nerve to call it overreacting. She could invite 120 people, hire a live band, throw an outdoor beach wedding. But there was no room for me. Me, the invisible support beam during the years she nearly lost everything. I sat there, in front of my laptop, as the afternoon breeze slipped through the window. A cup of cold coffee sat on the table. Next to my phone was Haley's message, still short, still flat, still emotionless. Hope you understand. I typed out a reply, then deleted it. Typed again, deleted again. Finally I turned off my phone. I understood. And I wasn't going to forgive this time. I didn't want to argue anymore. I didn't want another text from Mom telling me to be understanding of Haley. Or a fake sweet call from my sister trying to smooth things over. They chose to erase me from the biggest day of our family. So I would erase them from the priority list of my life. I opened my laptop. My fingers flew across the keyboard, clicking like I was unleashing every ounce of anger. Within 40 minutes, I had booked my dream vacation. A week at a 5-star resort in St. Lucia, an ocean view suite with spa services, infinity pool, and private balcony breakfast. It wasn't cheap. But I was done living frugally to help everyone else. This time, I was spending money for me. Not to support the family. Not to lend my sister a few $100. This was my vacation. To do something I'd never allowed myself before. Enjoy without asking anyone's permission. After booking, I stood up and walked out to the balcony. The late summer wind in Riverside brushed my face. But instead of feeling cool, it felt cold and empty. This was no longer a place I wanted to stay. Not during the week. My family would throw a big wedding and pretend I never existed. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram. In my gallery, I had a photo from a business trip to Santa Barbara. Me sitting in a cafe, espresso in hand, a faint smile, just relaxed enough to not look fake. I adjusted the colors, added a warm filter, then wrote the caption. They say, being cut from the guest list is awful. But hey, I think I'll survive. I hit post. 10 minutes later, the notifications started pouring in. My cousin Tyler sent a laughing emoji. An old friend commented, "Don't forget to take me next time." And the most surprising, Aunt Karen, the only relative who ever stood up for me, commented, "Proud of you for choosing your own happiness." I leaned back against the wall and quietly read every reply. No word from Mom. No emoji from Haley. Perfect. The next morning, I rolled my suitcase to the airport. No announcement, no itinerary left behind. I boarded that plane like I was stepping out of the role I'd been playing for over a decade. The role of the enduring brother. The mature child who has to sacrifice. The man who was never allowed to get angry. First class. Champagne poured to the brim. A travel magazine lay on the armrest with a bold headline, "Live fully, for once." I chuckled softly. During the entire flight, my phone stayed on silent. When we landed at Huanora Airport, a sleek black SUV was already waiting. The driver, a local man with a kind smile, had chill towels ready. I didn't have to lift a finger. Everything was perfectly arranged, because I booked the highest-end package. As we drove along the coastline, I rolled the window down. The ocean breeze carried scents of salt and jasmine. In the distance, red-roofed houses dotted the hills, and the water sparkled turquoise. I'd never seen the world look so beautiful. When I stepped into the resort lobby, it felt like walking into a painting. High ceilings, palm trees growing indoors, glossy dark wood at the front desk, and staff greeting me with an icy tropical cocktail. I handed over my passport. The receptionist smiled. "Welcome back, Mr. Morgan." I laughed. "This is my first time here, why welcome back?" She winked. "Because we hope you'll want to return." I didn't respond. But in my head, I knew. Yeah, maybe I will come back. Not for them. For me. I entered the room, dropped onto the bed, opened my phone. Not to read messages, but to post another photo. The view from the balcony. Endless blue ocean. Golden sunlight. A cocktail glass, catching the light. This time, the caption was shorter. One door closes, another opens. Straight to the sea. Then I locked my phone and lay still, letting the silence settle. They chose to cut me out of their lives. And me? I chose to live a life where I no longer needed anyone's approval. The sound of waves outside blended with the ocean breeze, creating a softness so soothing. I almost forgot I once belonged to a family that never let me breathe. I was stretched out on a sunbed, piña colada in hand. Soft jazz playing from the Bluetooth speaker by the pool. Wrapped in a crisp white robe, ironed at every seam by the resort staff. And in front of me, an endless horizon, clear and cloudless. Until the phone started vibrating. At first I ignored it. I was used to putting my old world on silent mode. But then it buzzed again. And again. Then lit up every 10 seconds. I picked it up, ready to turn it off completely, when a name popped up that made me pause. Jake, my cousin. one of the few people in the family whose brain was still intact. I opened the message, just one line. Bro, not joking. Haley's wedding just blew up. I squinted, staring at that line for 3 seconds, then another message popped up immediately. The groom walked out. During the reception, in front of everyone. Haley's losing it. I couldn't help it. I laughed, a real laugh, dry, pushed up from somewhere between my throat and chest. Where there used to be pain, now only sarcasm. The next message was from Mom. Morgan, call me right now, it's serious. I didn't reply, just sighed, set the phone down, and took a long sip of my cocktail. But it wouldn't stop buzzing. A young waitress brought over another plate of fruit, looked at me and smiled. You must be popular, your phone won't quit. I shrugged, smiled faintly. That's the sound of disaster, just not mine. I opened the phone again. Messages from Aunt Karen, from Tyler, from unknown numbers. From Haley. Please, I need you. Please answer me. Morgan, I was wrong, okay, but don't do this. Then a message from Jake, this one longer. And Haley got into a huge fight in the prep room. No one knows why, just heard Haley yelling, "You're a hypocrite." Then he walked straight out of the wedding hall. Not a word. Left her standing there in her wedding dress, stunned. I nearly choked on my drink laughing. But Jake wasn't done. Your mom started yelling to call the groom's family for an explanation. Aunt Lisa and Uncle Ron were screaming at each other about whose fault it all was. Grandma. I raised an eyebrow. Grandma? Grandma shouted in front of everyone. I told you, not inviting Morgan, karma's real. Then pointed straight at Haley. At that point I laughed so loud a few nearby guests turned to look. I raised my hand to apologize, but inside I was so satisfied I could have danced barefoot in the sand. My grandmother, the one who always stayed silent during family gatherings, to not get involved, was the first to stand up for me at the very wedding that erased me from their lives. I pulled the sunshade down over my face as I read Jake's last message. Haley's gone nuts, throwing things, screaming at everyone that it's all your fault. Your mom's been calling non-stop. Aunt Lisa almost called the cops when Haley nearly threw a wine glass at the groom. Before he walked out, I didn't text back. I just opened my camera and took a picture of the view in front of me. The beach in St. Lucia at dusk, crystal blue sky, gentle waves rolling like they'd never heard of chaos. I posted it to Instagram with the caption, "Didn't get invited to the wedding? No big deal. Getting uninvited from a disaster is even better." And I turned off my phone. I was lying on a lounger by the infinity pool, feet propped on the wooden railing, one hand holding a mojito, the other a novel I hadn't gotten past page 3. Not because it wasn't good, but because I kept getting interrupted by things that made me laugh out loud. One of them was the message, still glowing on my screen. "Please, I need you, please answer me," from Haley. I kept reading it like it was a riddle. No, that couldn't be. This was the same sister who, less than a week ago, had to trim the guest list, and didn't think her own brother deserved a seat at her golden wedding. And now that the groom had bailed, now she remembers me? I set the glass down on the table, wiped my fingers on the napkin, and pulled up 2 more messages that had just arrived. "Morgan, it's Mom, call me now. This isn't the time to be stubborn." A few seconds later. "The family's falling apart and where are you? In our biggest moment of need you choose to run away like a child? I'm so disappointed." "Ah, wonderful." Haley begging like I was the last lifeline in a burning ocean. And Mom, back on her usual track. "You're the problem, not her." I opened my blocked messages. More than 20 unread texts, from Mom, from Haley, from Aunt Lisa, and a few unknown numbers I guessed were distant relatives. Mom's messages kept going. "We're family, Morgan. No matter what, you can't turn your back on your own blood. Haley's breaking down, she needs you, I need you. If you had any maturity, you'd be back here helping us through this right now." I didn't know whether to laugh or throw my phone into the sea. Help? I've been helping my whole life, Mom. I helped when no one bothered to ask if I was okay. I helped when Haley fell apart, while you kept blaming the world instead of ever looking at your daughter's selfish habits. And now, when the bomb they built themselves finally exploded, they want me to come back and save them? I opened the screenshot of Haley's message and read it slowly. Please, I need you. I typed a reply. Funny. You didn't need me on the most important day of your life, but now you do? After it all falls apart? Deleted it. Typed another. Sorry, I'm busy enjoying my little childish meltdown. Deleted that too. In the end, I just sent one picture. St. Lucia's sunset, the sky blazing red, light sparkling off the waves like fire. With one line. I survived being cut from the guest list, now I'm just living. Then I blocked them all again. I didn't know what the feeling in my chest was. Anger, satisfaction, or just relief. But I knew one thing for sure. I didn't want to save anyone anymore. Especially not people who only saw me as their backup plan. A while later the phone buzzed again. This time, a voicemail. I wasn't planning to listen, but curiosity won. I hit play. Mom's voice, sharp and frantic. Morgan, you need to stop this childish behavior. You can't just keep running away. Haley is having a meltdown and you're acting like you don't even care. Family is supposed to stick together when things are hard, not disappear. I let out a bitter laugh and shook my head. Family isn't supposed to use you like a doormat until it wears thin, then only remember you when the floor gets dirty. Another voicemail autoplayed. This time, Haley's voice, choked up. I'm sorry, okay? I shouldn't have left you out of the wedding. I was stupid. But now I don't know what to do. You're the only one who can calm me down. I need you. I closed my eyes and quietly deleted the message. I'm not cold. I've just had enough. I stood up from the lounger and stepped onto the warm sand, letting the breeze carry away those too late pleas. There was only one thought in my mind. This isn't my problem anymore. I spent my entire youth compromising, understanding, trying to be the ideal big brother everyone assumed never got angry. But on the very day Haley, the sister I cherished like my own flesh and blood, pushed me out of her wedding, something inside me cracked. And now, when she calls my name, like I'm her savior after setting her own big day on fire, I just found it laughable. Without hesitation, I scrolled to 3 familiar names in my contacts. Mom, Emily, Jake. Pressed and held. Selected block. No second guessing, no regret. Every plea, every missed call, every message full of exclamation points. From now on, drowned in silence. For the first time in my life, I chose peace over obligation. I placed the phone back on the table, switched on Do Not Disturb and returned to the lounger where my half-finished cocktail waited. I had an entire afternoon left to enjoy. And I wasn't about to let anyone drag me back into the mess they created. A resort staff member passed by, noticing me gazing at the ocean, and politely paused. Mr. Morgan, we're about to start sunset yoga on the beach. Would you like to join? I smiled. No, thank you. I'm perfectly fine right here. He nodded and walked away. And I leaned back, arms behind my head, inhaling the salty breeze mixed with coconut from the drink beside me. It was strange, no ringing phone, no responsibilities suddenly falling from the sky onto my shoulders. Just me. And freedom. I must have dozed off without realizing it. When I opened my eyes, the sky was glowing orange. Sunset painting the sea with a silver shimmer. I sat up, stretched my shoulders, and was just about to go for a walk when my phone vibrated. An unknown number. I was about to ignore it, but then the name on the screen made me pause. Melissa. The only cousin in the extended family with any sense of right and wrong. Also one of the few who ever stood up for me during those dinner table ambushes. I answered. Morgan! Her voice was breathless, excited, slightly chaotic. Oh my God, you finally picked up. I just need to say this one thing, and then you can do whatever you want, okay? I chuckled. Say it. I've got under 3 minutes before my 5-star dinner reservation. Melissa took a long, audible breath. Okay, so Haley shattered a wine glass on the floor, threatened to jump in the garden fountain. Your mom almost got into a fight with the maid of honor. Grandma stood up and said, "This is the universe punishing us for ignoring the one person who always sacrificed, without complaining." I raised an eyebrow. Now even Grandma had joined Team Truth. Melissa went on. Then your mom turned around and blamed guess who? Don't say me. Yep, she said, if Morgan had been here, this wouldn't have happened. I couldn't help it, I laughed out loud. A deep, drawn-out laugh of pure satisfaction. I took a sip of cold water and simply said, I don't care. Melissa was silent for a beat. Then she laughed too. I figured. But, I just wanted you to know. You're not crazy. You're not being unreasonable. They're the ones who blew it. I just wish I'd followed you from the start. I looked out to the ocean, where the sun was slowly sinking like a red bronze disk. Maybe next time. I'd pick this place again in a heartbeat. Save me a spot. And, Morgan. Who? I'm glad you didn't go back. I smiled. For the first time in my life, I'm glad I didn't too. We ended the call in quiet. No more words needed. I headed toward the beachfront restaurant, where wine and steak were waiting. And in my mind only one thought remained. They can patch up that ruined wedding together. As for me, I'm keeping this freedom, no matter what. Morgan's story is a powerful reminder about rediscovering oneself after years of sacrificing too much for others, especially for family. Sometimes we forget that love and sacrifice aren't always repaid the way we hope. Morgan's choice to walk away in search of peace and freedom was a bold one, showing that putting yourself first is sometimes necessary in order to live a fulfilling life. We can't always be the ones putting out fires for everyone else's problem. What do you think about Morgan's decision in this story? Would you be brave enough to choose yourself when your family needs you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss more real-life stories about family and personal growth. I know someone once said, no one gets abandoned by their own family. But that's a lie. I once stood shivering in pouring rain, the door locked from the inside, while my mother quietly pulled the curtain shut, like I was some stranger. I once walked over 5 miles under the 95-degree sun, my shoes worn thin and my feet bleeding, just because I missed the bus. And I was only 12 when they called that character building. If you think I grew up in a family, I'm sorry. It felt more like a cold training camp. I'm Alice, and this is the story of how my parents, Jason and Linda, taught me that love isn't for everyone under the same roof. When I was little, I thought all families were like that. That all parents stayed silent during dinner, only speaking to give orders or yell. That every mom set a timer when you cried, then said, you get 3 minutes to be weak. That if a child wanted to be heard, they had to hold their breath so long their face turned purple before anyone might notice. My dad was a former soldier. My mom used to be a teacher, but after I was born, she quit her job and poured all her energy into training me to become someone who depends on no one. They called me their first experiment and always said that if I failed, I'd have no one to blame but myself. I still remember a winter night in Minnesota when I was just 9. I forgot to take the trash out on time. A small mistake. Or so I thought. But not my dad. He quietly opened the back door, dragged me outside by hand and said, "Stand here until you understand the value of responsibility." Then he closed the door, no coat, no shoes. It was around 34 degrees Fahrenheit. I trembled, my hands and feet numb, but the only thing I dared to do was stay silent. I stood there for nearly an hour, and when my mother finally opened the door, she just said, "Hopefully next time, you'll think twice before being useless." When I was 11, I overslept and missed the school bus. My mom refused to drive me, and my dad sneered. "You made the mistake, you deal with it." So I walked from home to school, 6 miles. I carried a backpack weighing nearly 20 pounds, my feet blistered, my back soaked in sweat. When I finally got to class, nearly 2 hours late, the teacher called my mom. She simply replied, "She needs to learn not to be dependent," and hung up. When I told my friends, they thought I was lying or being dramatic. Some even said, "Your parents are just strict." But it wasn't strict, it was cold. It was the way they trained me, like I was a survival machine. Emotionless, unloved. Every day at home was a silent war. I had to learn how to read moods from every frown on my mom's face, every raised eyebrow from my dad. Anything could be an excuse for a lesson. Forgetting to fold a blanket, spilling milk, laughing too loud, asking a question at the wrong time. I used to dream they'd one day hug me and say, "We're sorry, Alice, you didn't deserve this." But that never happened. They never apologized. They just kept training me, and day after day, I stopped being a child. I became a training project, a doll with a calm face, even when screaming inside. I thought I was used to it all. But I was wrong. Because the final lesson they gave me when I was 15, it wasn't like anything before, and it changed my life. I'll never forget that day. The Florida sun was burning like it wanted to melt the world, and the smell of hot plastic from the car seat is still etched in my memory like an unhealed scar. I was sitting in the back seat, headphones in, half dizzy from the heat, while Jason and Linda, my parents, argued about something completely meaningless. Like always, I didn't care. They only spoke when giving orders or criticizing. The rest was just background noise, loud and repetitive. The trip to visit my cousin in Tallahassee ended with a silent dinner and a snide remark from my mom. I don't know why she didn't pick up any grace from the other side of the family. I didn't respond. I was used to being the perpetual disappointment. The car stopped in a small town called Crestview, near an old train station. Paint peeled off the rooftops, faded signs barely visible under the harsh sun. Jason turned around, his eyes empty. "Go get me a soda." I took off my headphones. "What?" Linda turned, her lips curled into a crooked smile. "Your dad's thirsty. I want a bottle of water too." "Hurry up, sweetheart." I looked at them, a twinge of doubt pricking at my chest, but still opened the door and stepped out. Heat blasted my face like an open oven. I walked across the cracked platform, pulled out the last $10 bill from my pocket, and fed it into a vending machine that groaned like it was dying. I grabbed the soda and water and turned back, and the car was gone. No cars parked nearby, just a wide, sun-scorched lot. No vehicle, no people. No sound, except for the cicadas crying like grief. I stood frozen, the cold soda now useless in my hand, my heart pounded, my brain searching for any explanation. Maybe they just moved the car, maybe they went to get gas. My phone buzzed, a message. I opened it, and only read 4 lines before my whole body went cold, despite the blazing heat. "Let's see how long it takes you to get home on your own. This is a test. Don't call Aunt Elaine. You need to learn how to face the world. Don't disappoint us." I froze. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a joke. They really left me. No suitcase, no wallet, no map, no one beside me. I called back. Straight to voicemail. Called again. Nothing. Panic crawled up my throat like a tightening rope. I texted back, only to get one more line. "Don't make a mess of things, handle it yourself." I nearly threw up. I was only 16. No driver's license, no transportation. No plan. Rage began to rise beneath the layer of fear. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, crushing the water bottle in my hand until it crumpled, then took a deep breath. As if I could exhale the nightmare out of my chest. I checked my pockets. Some loose change? A phone with 27% battery? A crumpled paper map stuffed in the back of my backpack. Something I'd accidentally kept from last year's camping trip. I walked into the station where only one old man sat behind the counter looking half asleep. "Is there a bus station nearby?" I asked. My voice cracked with a lump in my throat. He raised an eyebrow and glanced out the window. "About 2 miles left down the main road." but nothing's coming through until tomorrow afternoon." I nodded and turned away. My feet stepped onto the burning pavement, knees aching like they might give out, but I didn't stop. I didn't let the tears fall. Didn't scream that I'd been left behind like some kind of stray. I did the one thing they forbade me to do. I called Aunt Elaine. The only one in the family who ever looked at me with real kindness. "Ellis, oh my God, what happened?" Her voice startled through the second ring. "They left me," I said, and for the first time in my life, my voice truly shook. She was silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then she spoke clearly. "Stay right where you are, I'm coming." I sat down by the dusty roadside, staring out across the red dirt road. Back then, I didn't know my life had just taken a completely different path. And I would never go back. When Aunt Elaine arrived, I was curled up under the narrow shade of a utility pole. The hot wind sweeping across the pavement felt like a cruel reminder that I had nowhere left to go. Her old SUV tore into the lot like time itself was burning under the tires. She jumped out before I could say anything, wrapping me in the kind of hug that made it hard to breathe. "Oh my God, my poor girl." Her voice trembled, arms clinging to me like she was afraid to let go. "What the hell did they do to you?" I didn't answer. I had no words strong enough to describe what happened. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going back. Ever. 3 days later, I stood in the tiny living room of her house in Gainesville, staring at the only suitcase I had, the one she'd bought for me, because I had nothing but an old backpack. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. But it felt like a massive void had opened up in my chest, and I had to fill it with something, anything, just to keep from being swallowed whole. "What do you plan to do next?" she asked, sitting beside me with a steaming mug of peppermint tea. I looked out the window. The sky was overcast, but no rain. Just like me, gray, but not breaking. "You know I'm not going back, right?" She nodded. "I'm not going to push you to do anything. But if you stay here, you'll have to start from scratch. No Jason, no Linda, no more lesson plans. Just you." I nodded. For the first time, I felt like I had a choice. Not just being thrown into some script someone else wrote. Even if the road ahead was rough, at least it was mine. I got a job at a small cafe near the University of Florida, just waiting tables, but the owner was kind and didn't look at me like I was a broken kid. I worked from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m., then came home and studied for the GED at night. I wanted to reclaim the years of school I'd missed. I wanted to go to college, not to prove anything to Jason or Linda, but to prove to myself that I could. Aunt Elaine helped me in every way she could. She wasn't rich, but she was rich in love, something I had never really experienced before. She drove me to my exams, waited in the car all morning, bought me an SAT prep book even though it cost almost an entire week's worth of food for both of us. A year later I got accepted into the University of Central Florida with a partial scholarship. The day I received the acceptance letter, I stood frozen for almost 5 minutes. "You're about to have a new life, Alice," Aunt said, taking my hand. "And this time, you get to write it." 4 years later, I graduated with honors in urban development. When I walked up to receive my diploma, I didn't hear the applause. I only heard the voice in my head, the voice of a 16-year-old girl standing silently under the cracked roof of a train station, hands trembling from being abandoned. And I whispered to myself, "You did it, Alice. You survived." Right after graduation, I worked for a small real estate firm in Jacksonville. I started with the jobs no one wanted, cleaning model homes, checking building permits, cold calling skeptical clients. But I learned fast. I watched everything, how people built trust and how they shattered it in a single meeting. 3 years later I started my own thing. I took out a small loan from a local bank, combined it with the savings from years of side jobs and investments, and founded Alder Urban Living. A simple name, carrying no trace of the family I came from. I wanted a complete restart. The beginning was rough. At one point I had only $93 left in my account, and a project that got cancelled at the last minute. But I held on. I learned how to negotiate. how to calculate risk, how to turn an abandoned lot into a modern housing block for young families. Little by little, Aldera stopped being a stranger's name. I hired employees. I rehired a lawyer who once rejected me in my first year. I bought back the old office building that my first company used to own, just to remind myself that nothing is permanent, not even the lowest starting point. At 29, Aldera hit 8-figure revenue. I stood on the 12th floor balcony of our office, looking out over the Orlando skyline, and I smiled. I had once been left behind at a train station, unwanted. Now, hundreds of people called me boss. And I never forgot that feeling of being discarded, because it's the reason I never stopped moving forward. But I also knew, the past never really dies. It only sleeps, waiting for a knock at the door. And on a summer day, that knock came. It was the past. And it came to collect me. 20 years after the day they left me like damaged goods, I stood in the glass-walled office of my downtown Orlando headquarters, 17th floor of the building bearing the name Aldera HQ, looking down at the busy streets below. Everything I had, every brick, every contract, every dream, was built from a pain I never chose. But I survived. I lived well. And I thought the past had rotted away forever in the shadows behind me. Until my phone rang. A name I hadn't seen in 2 decades appeared on the screen. Vivian. I let it ring until it stopped. Then it rang again. And this time, I answered. Alice? My sister's voice trembled, like it had been dragged out from a dusty pile of old memories. I didn't say anything. Are you doing okay? I laughed, a dry, brittle sound. After 20 years, that's the opener you're going with? Vivian was silent for a second. Then she said without circling around. They're in trouble, Alice. Debt. The house was foreclosed. Mom, she's depressed. Dad. She choked. Dad lost his entire retirement on some stupid bets. They need you. I clenched the phone, metal digging into my palm. My heart didn't soften. It boiled. I don't owe them anything, Vivian. You don't have to forgive. Just help. Hell. I cut her off. Do you remember when I was 16? Remember the day they left me at that broken-down train station with a soda can and not a single explanation? Do you? They thought you'd come back. They didn't think at all. My voice was sharp as a blade. They never saw me as a person. I was a test. Something to train. And now that they've failed, they come back like I'm some charity bank? Vivian was silent. I heard a tired sigh through the line. I just want to keep the family together. Family? I almost laughed. Family ended for me the day they locked the door and left me standing in the January rain. I hung up. I thought that would be the end of it. But I underestimated them. Jason and Linda Holloway didn't understand failure, only how to flip the table. 3 days later, Jenny, my assistant, walked into my office, face pale. Alice, you need to see this. I took the iPad from her hands. The screen was already open to Facebook. A new post from an account named Linda Holloway. We are grieving parents. Our only daughter abandoned us when we needed her most. After everything we sacrificed, now we face illness, poverty, and loneliness. She's forgotten her blood. She chose money over family. Below were hundreds of shares. Thousands of comments. So sad. Today's kids are so selfish. How could someone abandon their elderly parents? I heard she's rich. So ungrateful. I felt sick. Not from the lies, but from how smoothly they cast themselves as the victims. They knew how to perform. They always did. Some clients are asking questions. Jenny whispered. A few canceled appointments. I closed my eyes, my head pounding like a drill. They didn't just want money. They wanted to pull me back at any cost. I opened Instagram. My company's account was tagged in a series of posts with hashtags like bad daughter, filial piety, pay up Alice. I smirked. If they wanted to play this game, I wasn't backing down. I posted a black and white photo of the Crestview train station. The place they left me when I was 16. The caption was a single line. Not everyone who gives birth to you deserves to be called family. 2 minutes later, Vivian called. I didn't pick up. An hour later, Linda texted. You've disappointed us, you owe us, Alice. I stared at the words, blood boiling like molten steel. I typed back. No. The day you drove away from that parking lot, every debt was wiped clean. Then I hit block. The screen went quiet again. Only, I knew, this was just the beginning. 3 days after I posted the train station photo on Instagram, the real battle began. Every morning I woke up to dozens of new notifications, posts, comments, direct messages. Some called me ungrateful, others labeled me a velvet-wrapped snake. Wealthy, successful, but heartless. There were even videos analyzing my cold-blooded behavior, based on carefully edited photos. Some TikTok influencer even made a fake clip claiming to be a former classmate, saying I once bragged, "I'll abandon my parents if they stand in the way of my success." The media parasites began to swarm. I didn't care about strangers gossiping. But when my company's name started showing up in hashtags like, boycott all dairy, and, don't buy from the ungrateful, I knew it had crossed the line from personal to professional. Jenny walked into my office Monday morning, her face like she'd swallowed ice. She held a stack of printed emails in her hands. Alice. I'm sorry. Some of our partners are asking for clarification about your family situation. I clenched my fists. My family is a scar, not an investment portfolio item. Jenny placed the printouts on my desk, hesitating. 3 major clients have just delayed signing. One of them messaged me directly. We don't want to be associated with someone being called unfilial in the media. I let out a bitter laugh. So now it's a story about being unfilial. Fantastic. I stood up and walked to the window, where Orlando stretched out like a moving painting. The buildings I helped design, the corners I once dreamed of transforming. Now it all felt like it could collapse under one well-crafted lie, and a crowd eager to point fingers. That's when my phone rang. Caller, Dominic Hayes, one of Aldera's biggest investors. I answered. Dominic? Alice, I'll be blunt. What's happening online, it's not good for the company's image. I sighed. What, you want me to go live and cry because I didn't send money to the people who once left me at a train station? A pause. I'm not judging your personal life, but we're talking about customer trust. Is there any way to ease this? No. Then you need to be ready for consequences. I hung up. An hour later, a new post from Jason Holloway appeared. A photo of the two of them sitting in a dim, run-down room, eyes cast to the floor. We never meant to hurt her. Everything we taught her was to make her strong. And now, in our old age, she turns her back on us as if we never existed. Over 12,000 shares. A wave of fake sentiment came crashing in. If it were me, I couldn't live with that kind of guilt. How can someone be so rich, yet so poor in heart? Parents aren't perfect, but no one deserves to be abandoned. I wanted to smash the screen. But instead I opened an old folder on my computer. Photos of the train station that day. Emails from the lawyer I'd contacted when I reported being abandoned. Audio files of Aunt Elaine's testimony used for temporary guardianship paperwork. I'd kept everything, not out of hate, but because I knew they'd come back. And now they had. An emergency meeting was held that afternoon. I sat at the head of the table, facing the PR team, 2 senior managers, and our in-house attorney. No one spoke until Mike, our communications director, finally did. We advise against a public response. The more you engage, the more the media latches on. I shook my head. So you think I should let them keep lying while this company's reputation bleeds out? Mike looked at me, his round eyes behind glasses narrowing slightly. Alice, empathy isn't something you win with logic. The public is being driven by emotion. I leaned back, hands clasped together. Then, I'll use the only thing I have. Truth. Cold, detached, the same way they treated me. I pulled out a USB and plugged it into the laptop. On the screen appeared an audio clip from 2006, Linda's sharp voice. "If she can't find her way back, then she doesn't deserve to be my daughter." The meeting room went dead silent. "I'm going to make everything public. People deserve to know. But this time, not through their lens." I stood up. "They want psychological warfare? Then let me show them what it really looks like." That night, I opened my personal laptop and wrote a post. When I was 16, my parents left me at a train station. Not because it was a mistake, but because they wanted to see how I'd manage on my own. They didn't look for me for 20 years. But when I became successful, they came back. And when I said no, they created a heartbreaking tale about being abandoned. This is the first and only time I'll speak publicly. I'm not ungrateful. I'm just surviving. I hit post. Then I sat in the dark office, waiting for the second storm to hit. I was ready. Less than an hour after the post went up, my phone on the desk started lighting up non-stop like it was under attack. Notifications, messages, emails, missed calls. I sat still in the dark office, lit only by the glow of the laptop screen, like a spotlight aimed straight at someone who just stepped out from backstage. The post wasn't a slap, it was a dissection, cold and precise. Every sentence cut straight through the fake narrative Jason and Linda had spent so long crafting. I attached screenshots of old messages. The one from the day they left me at the train station. "Handle it yourself, this is a maturity lesson." I posted the audio recording of my mother scoffing while talking on the phone, her voice clear. "I don't need to raise her anymore, let the world teach her." I included the scanned file of my temporary guardianship documents. When Aunt Elaine took me in while my biological parents ignored my calls in the middle of a stormy night. I didn't curse. I didn't beg. I didn't use clickbait words. I just laid out the truth, raw and unapologetic. And the public began to shift. The first comment that made me stop came from a woman named Michelle. "I believed her parents' post. I'm a mother too. But after reading what you shared, I'm horrified. No one deserves to be treated like that." Then came others. "I was left at a supermarket when I was 10. Just because my mom was mad. I know that feeling. If you survived that kind of upbringing, you're the strongest person I've ever seen. You're not ungrateful. You're living proof of surviving emotional abuse." By noon the next day, my post had over 3 million views. News sites started picking it up. CEO claps back with brutal truth. The truth behind the ungrateful daughter story that broke the internet. The woman who exposed her toxic parents and got the whole community behind her. I walked into the office the next morning like someone returning from war. And I wasn't walking alone. The employees who once stayed silent out of caution now greeted me with looks of quiet respect. Mike, the communications director, nodded slightly. "I was wrong, your response, perfect timing." I looked around the meeting room. The same room where they had advised me to stay quiet, to endure, to wait for the storm to pass. "They wanted to make me the villain in my own story," I said. "Now they've lost control of the narrative." That night Jason and Linda responded with another video, but this time, it all unraveled fast. They sat in the living room, Jason pretending to sob while Linda repeated a line like she had memorized it. "We just wanted our daughter to understand that we sacrificed so much." But the clip, barely 2 minutes long, was dissected frame by internet users. Inconsistent facial expressions. Fake tears. Newly installed living room lights, proving they weren't nearly as poor as they claimed. The comments were no longer sympathetic. They were furious. Shameful. Using their own child to fish for pity. Not every parent deserves forgiveness. I used to hate Alice, now I just want to hug her. On Friday morning, Dominic Hayes called again. His tone was completely different. "I want to apologize, Alice. I didn't believe you from the beginning." "You don't need to apologize," I replied, cold as ice. "But from now on, remember, silence is also choosing a side." I hung up. I sat back in my chair and closed my eyes. 15 years of building trust with the world, and a single lie almost burned it all down. But I held firm. And this time, no one could rewrite the truth. 3 days later, a reporter from The Atlantic sent me an interview request. The topic: the journey of an abandoned child and her public stand against emotional abuse in the family. I took a few seconds to think. Then I typed back, "I'm ready. But this time we tell the story the right way. No tears, no sugarcoating. Just the truth." I hit send, and for the first time in years, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. No more fear. No more inner conflict. I had reclaimed my voice. Less than an hour after my post went live, my phone on the desk lit up like it was under siege. Notifications, messages, emails, missed calls. I sat motionless in the dark office, lit only by the glow of the laptop screen. Like a spotlight shining down on someone who had just stepped out from backstage. The post wasn't a slap. It was a cold dissection. Every sentence was a precise incision into the fake narrative Jason and Linda had so carefully constructed. I attached screenshots of old messages, the one from the day they left me at the station. "Handle it yourself. This is a life lesson." I posted the audio recording of my mother sneering as she spoke on the phone with someone. Her voice clear. "I don't need to raise her anymore. Let life teach her." I included the scanned temporary guardianship papers from when Aunt Elaine took me in, while my biological parents refused to answer my calls during a stormy night. I didn't curse. I didn't beg. I didn't use sensational language. I just presented the truth, bare and unapologetic. And public opinion began to shift. The first comment that made me pause came from a woman named Michelle P. "I believed her parents' posts. I'm a mother too. But after reading what you shared, I'm horrified. No one deserves to be treated that way." Then came more. "I was left behind at a grocery store when I was 10, just because my mom was mad. I know how that feels. If you survived that kind of parenting, you're the strongest person I've ever seen. You're not ungrateful, you're living proof of surviving emotional abuse." By noon the next day, my post had over 3 million views. News outlets began picking it up. CEO fights back with powerful truth. The reality behind the ungrateful daughter viral story. The woman who exposed her toxic parents and gained a movement of support. I walked into the office the next morning like someone returning from battle. And I wasn't walking alone. The employees who once stayed silent out of fear now greeted me with respectful eyes. Mike, the communications director, gave me a small nod. "I was wrong. The way you fought back, it was perfect timing." I looked around the conference room. The same place where, just yesterday, they advised me to stay silent, be patient, and wait for the storm to pass. They once tried to make me the villain in my own story, I said. Now they no longer control the narrative. That night, Jason and Linda responded with another video, but this time, it all unraveled quickly. They sat in the living room, Jason faking sobs while Linda repeated a line like she'd memorized it. "We just wanted our daughter to understand how much we sacrificed." But the clip, barely 2 minutes long, was dissected by the internet, frame by frame. Inconsistent expressions. Fake tears. Newly installed living room lights, proving they weren't nearly as poor as they claimed. The comments weren't sympathetic anymore. They were angry. Shameful. Using your own child to beg for pity. Not all parents deserve forgiveness. I used to hate Alice. Now I want to hug her. Friday morning, Dominic Hayes called again. His voice was completely different. "I want to apologize, Alice. I didn't believe you from the start." "You don't need to apologize," I answered coldly. "But from now on, remember, silence is also taking a side." I hung up. I sat back down and closed my eyes. 15 years of building trust with the world, and one lie, almost burned it all down. But I held my ground. And this time, no one could rewrite the truth. 3 days later, a journalist from The Atlantic sent me an interview request. Topic: the journey of an abandoned child and the public stand against emotional abuse in the family. I paused for a few seconds. Then I typed, "I'm ready." But this time, we tell the story the right way. No tears, no sugarcoating. Just the truth. I hit send, and for the first time in years, I felt something lift off my shoulders. No more fear. No more guilt. I had taken back my voice. I was reviewing the final design plans for the Riverstone residential project when Jenny pushed the door open, holding a thick, cream-colored envelope, sealed with the stamp of an express courier. "Alice, this came for you, priority delivery." Nina's voice was tight as a string. I saw the sender's name clearly printed in the top left corner. Holloway and Brooks, attorneys at law. I already knew. I had been waiting. I opened the envelope with deliberate slowness, as if I could delay whatever was about to appear. The first page embossed my name, Alice Holloway, at the top, followed by a bold, cold, shameless heading. Official Notice of Lawsuit. Based on the Filial Responsibility Law Section 7, Clause 11 of the Pennsylvania Civil Code. I froze. I had never felt so disgusted by a legal document in my life. My parents were suing me. Suing me, the daughter they abandoned at a train station when I was 16, the person they hadn't contacted for 2 decades. For failing to provide financial support in their old age. I exhaled slowly, the rage rising quietly in my chest like a fire smoldering beneath ash. "Jenny, call David, now. I need to see him within 30 minutes. David Rhodes, my lead attorney, sat across from me, the copy of the lawsuit spread out in front of him like a rotten joke. Legally speaking, Alice, Florida doesn't have a strict filial responsibility statute, but if they filed for temporary residence in Pennsylvania or pushed this at the federal level, it could be messy. I folded my arms, eyes fixed on the page. Messy? They're trying to use the law to chain me to people who threw me away like garbage. They don't want money, they want control. David nodded slowly. They think you'll be scared. Afraid of litigation, afraid of the media, afraid of the shame. And if you pay, just once, they'll have their hands around your neck forever. I smirked. Then they picked the wrong person. That night, my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered. Linda's voice came through, sweet as syrup but laced with venom. "Alice, I just want to have a calm conversation. If you agree to support us financially, we can avoid unnecessary trouble." I cut her off, every word sharp as a blade. "No. Do you have any idea how much we're suffering?" Her voice suddenly rose. "We're losing our home, our insurance, our—" "Lost your dignity a long time ago," I growled. "And now you want to play the good parent?" Linda went silent for exactly 2 seconds. Then her tone shifted. "If you fight this lawsuit, we'll take everything to the press. You really want your image tied to a filial piety case, don't you?" I laughed. A cold, piercing sound that made her go quiet on the other end. "Go public. Share it all. Let the world see how biological parents can abandon their child at a train station and come back 20 years later demanding money, like debt collectors." I hung up. And I didn't shake. Not even a little. The next morning I summoned legal, communications and investor relations teams. On the table was the detailed legal response I had prepared with David. Alice Holloway denies any financial obligation under the Filial Responsibility Statute, due to complete absence of care or support from the parents, over more than 2 decades. Etched, evidence of abandonment. Text messages. Medical records, documenting psychological trauma. And temporary guardianship, by Aunt Elaine. I ended the meeting with one line. They chose to fight with the law, then I'll show them what it looks like to fight with justice. That night, I posted my next statement, attaching the lawsuit. They left me when I was 16, no contact, no help, not a dime of support. Now they're suing me. For money, for power, for reputation. I'm not writing this to complain. I'm writing this as a warning. Psychological wounds should never be legalized into obligation. The post spread like wildfire. Child advocacy groups, abandoned child survivor networks. Everyone shared it. Lawyers, journalists, activists. all stood behind me. A new hashtag emerged. NO1, trending nationwide. 3 days later, David messaged me. Their lawyers are proposing a settlement, they're starting to feel public pressure. I replied with one line. No compromise, take it to court. Because this wasn't just a lawsuit. It was the first time I was seeking justice for that 16-year-old girl from years ago. Monday, 9 a.m. I was in a meeting with the new project team when Jenny knocked rapidly. She peeked in, pale-faced, voice trembling. Alice, you need to come downstairs, right now, something's happening. I frowned. What is it? They hear, Jason and Linda. They're causing a scene in the lobby, and there are reporters. I stood up instantly, heart pounding, not from fear, but from rage rising like lava in my chest. I clenched my fists, nodded at Jenny. Call security. But don't do anything until I get there. When the elevator doors opened, I could already hear their familiar fake sobbing, echoing through the main lobby of Aldera HQ. Linda, dressed in an overly flashy floral dress, was sitting on the floor, clutching a tissue to wipe away non-existent tears. Jason stood beside her, his face flushed red, pointing fingers at my staff, yelling non-stop. We just want to talk to our daughter. Are we not allowed to see our own child? Is this America or a prison camp? Around them, my employees were whispering, some were recording on their phones. A local CNN reporter was already there, camera poised. I walked forward, the sound of my heels echoing sharply across the marble floor, slicing through the chaos like a knife. Jason spotted me first. His eyes lit up, as if he'd just found the spark he needed to fuel his performance. Alice, finally decided to come face your own flesh and blood? He growled. Ignoring us, does that make you feel proud now? I stopped in front of them, standing tall, gaze cold as steel. I didn't answer immediately. I looked around at the faces watching, the cameras rolling, and even the people who once doubted me. Then I turned back, looking directly at the two people who used to call themselves my parents. Ooh, you're not my parents anymore. Not because I turned away, but because you chose that 20 years ago, when you left me like garbage next to a vending machine. Linda began to wail louder, clutching her chest. What are you saying, Alice? We're blood. I gave birth to you. How can you be this cruel? I didn't blink. Blood. Blood that made their daughter walk 6 miles under the summer sun because she missed the bus? Blood that locked her outside in a thunderstorm? Blood that spread lies and sent social media to attack her just because she refused to give you money? Jason snapped. You think money made you a person? You've forgotten who you are. Everything you have is because we raised you. I laughed, a sharp, contemptuous sound that echoed through the lobby like a slap. Raised me? You left me when I was 16. The one who raised me was Aunt Elaine, and me, working 3 jobs, sleeping in smelly dorms, living on instant noodles. You didn't raise me, you starved me. Body and soul. Linda sobbed harder, glancing quickly toward the camera as if waiting for a close-up. Then she shakily stood up, reaching out to touch my arm. Sweetheart, I know, sometimes we were too strict, but now we just need a chance. Just a little help, then things will get better. I stepped back, my voice firm as stone. I don't help people who abandon me. I don't fund those who exploit my past for pity. And I don't forgive lies. I turned to security. Remove them from the building. If they come back, call the police. Jason lunged forward, shouting. You'll regret this, Alice. We made you. You're my flesh and blood. I didn't turn. Didn't flinch. I walked straight toward the elevator, my footsteps steady, like the heartbeat of someone who had just cut out the final tumor from their life. As the doors closed, I saw Linda struggling, yanking at the guard's arm, her tears still refusing to fall. Jason was still shouting something I no longer cared to hear. The doors shut, all the noise behind me vanished. And for the first time, I felt like I had locked the past away. For good. The lawsuit lasted nearly 4 months. 4 months of every document, every memory, every old wound being dragged into the light. But then justice spoke, blunt, cold, and final. The court ruled, Alice Holloway has no financial obligation to Jason and Linda Holloway. No support, no responsibility, no legal ties whatsoever. I sat silently in the courtroom, hands clasped, no shaking, no tears. I just breathed. One deep breath. Like I had just swum to the surface, after 20 years of being drowned. The following week, headlines exploded across the media. Titles competed for drama. Parents sue daughter for refusing support, bitter defeat. Manufactured victimhood. When parents fake it for sympathy. Alice Holloway, a symbol of survival from emotional abuse. Aldera's reputation rebounded quickly. Clients returned in waves. Investors called to apologize. Even charitable organizations invited me to speak at conferences on family boundaries and personal autonomy. And Jason and Linda? They lost their home. Lost their image. Lost the sympathy they once exploited with crocodile tears. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just felt quiet. One Saturday morning while watering my balcony plants at my high-rise apartment in downtown Orlando, my phone rang. Once again a familiar name appeared. Vivian. I hesitated for a second. Then I picked up. Alice? I'm sorry. Her voice was hoarse, choked like someone who had cried too much. I stayed silent, letting her continue. They've really lost everything. The house was taken by the bank. Dad drinks all day now, slumped outside a cheap motel room. Mom just lies in bed, not saying a word. They have no one left. They still have you, I said calmly. Vivian's voice broke. But I don't have the strength. No money, no means. Alice, if you could, just a little help. A small room, some living expenses. I took a deep breath. Vivian, I don't hate you. I don't even hate them. But I can't do to myself what they once did to me. Abandon myself to save someone else. But they're still our parents, no matter what. No, I cut in, for the first time speaking with complete clarity. They were my parents. But they gave up that role long ago. I can't rescue a ship that steered itself into the rocks and then blame myself for not jumping into the sea. Vivian didn't respond. Only the sound of wind slipping through the phone, like a quiet sigh. I'm sorry, but I've chosen to keep my boundary, and I won't break it again. I hung up. My heart didn't feel light. It didn't feel heavy either, it just felt real. The next day, I drove out of the city, down quiet country roads, toward Gainesville. The only place I was ever called someone's girl. The place where I could sleep peacefully, without fear of being woken in the middle of the night for a character lesson. I arrived at Aunt Elaine's house in the late afternoon. She was sitting under the porch, eyes half closed, a mug of herbal tea on the old wooden table. Alice. She opened her eyes and smiled, warm as sunlight. I walked up, knelt beside her, and hugged her thin arm. I'm home, Auntie. I knew you'd come back eventually, she gently stroked my hair. Because in the end, we all returned to where we were once loved. We sat there for a long time, not speaking, no need to. Only the breeze and the fading light, carrying away the dust of the past. That night, I took her out to her favorite Mexican restaurant. She ordered 2 margaritas, then raised her glass. To freedom. And to my girl, who learned how to choose herself without asking for permission. I clinked my glass with hers, a soft smile on my lips. For the first time in 20 years, I no longer carried the urge to prove anything to anyone. No longer the abandoned child. No longer the adult trying to save the ones who once hurt her. Just me, a free woman, living truthfully, and owing nothing to anyone. My story isn't one of complaints. It's a reminder that sometimes, to live honestly, we must walk away from those labeled family. I've learned that blood doesn't guarantee love, and forgiveness doesn't mean allowing the pain to continue. Letting go isn't weakness. It's the choice to choose peace over repeating cruelty. I'm no longer the abandoned girl. I'm a survivor. And now, I live with full ownership of my life. What do you think about Alice's story? Should boundaries within family be upheld even if it comes at a cost? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and life.